Good morning, everyone. We'll call this meeting to order. Welcome to everyone. I don't think we have anyone excused from the meeting today, so we're all here. The first item on the agenda, look for the adoption of the minutes of our November 4th meeting. Are there any questions regarding that, or a motion or question? Oh, Polly?
The motion regards to Patricia Fire Hall was not how I thought we had passed it. I thought we'd agreed to proceed, but not with the cost. Did I misunderstand when we passed the motion?
Clarification somewhere with regard to the motion on the Patricia Fire Hall? Who can clarify that?
I'll just pull it up here and read it. All right, so it's on page 5 of the minutes, motion C-322/21, moved by Councillor Adina Scandrup that Collier's project leaders be appointed as project managers for the remainder of the Patricia Fire Hall project to construct a new pre-engineered building on the site with the approval of the capital expenditure in the amount of $1,532,000 coming from the capital building fund in the 2022 budget. And I think that was the motion as it had been written by Stuart. Is that right, Ariana? Am I recalling proper?
I'll go back and check the report really quickly. Actually, no, the motion in the RFD was approval of the capital expenditure increase coming from the capital building fund in the 2022 budget, no specific dollar amount.
Okay, so we'll amend the minutes. Is that the motion? Accept the minutes as amended to remove the 1.532 million.
Thank you for that clarification, Councillor Johnson. So we'll approve the minutes with the amendment. Is that's what we're doing? Any other questions or comments with regard to those minutes? If not, Greg?
Yeah, how I understood it is that we were basically recommending Colliers to be the project to recommend to be the leaders appointed. Not so much the dollar amount, but that Colliers was the ones that were going to be handling the moving forward of it, right?
Okay, thank you. Any other questions or comments? If not, a motion to accept the amended minutes of the November 4th meeting would be in order. Anyone? Adina, please. Councillor Scandrup. All in favor of the motion, please indicate. That's carried. Thank you. Are there any post-agenda items for our meeting today? Anyone have anything to add to the agenda? Matt, please.
We will have for in camera 2 legal items, 1 land item, and 2 intermunicipal items.
Okay, that will be in our in-camera session, which we will have toward the end of the meeting. Any other post-agenda items? If not, a motion to adopt the agenda as presented would be in place. Councillor Christman. All in favor of that, please indicate. That's carried. Thank you. Question period. Are there any questions from anyone for council this morning?
There are no questions from the live stream today. Thanks.
Okay. Seeing no questions, we will move on to our agenda to bylaws number 7. Matt, would you take us through that?
We'll hand
I'm
it over
sorry.
to Maria.
Yeah,
She's the
please.
brains of the operation.
I'm sorry. Go ahead, Maria.
Thanks. Not sure about that, but we'll try. Okay, this is, make sure I have the right one in front of me. Yeah. Bylaw 2019-21 for first reading for a land use amendment. The purpose of the application is to redesignate lands from residential rural district to business rural district to accommodate a flea market type business. Pull up this zoning map. So the location is on this map with a star. It is the only residential rural district within that strip. So the neighboring lands are all in the business rural district, land use district of our land use bylaw. So there is a house located on the parcel which was built prior to the land use bylaw being in place. So prior to 1990 is kind of the date that we use for when a land use bylaw was put in place at the county. So this house would be considered legal non-conforming as it doesn't have a development permit, but it is good to stay there as is, to be used as a residential lot until such time that something happens and changes the use of the land. In this case, the person residing on the property started a flea market type business without first coming to the county and requesting a development permit. So that flea market is there, and in order to bring that property now into compliance, we need to do a land use amendment to change that property into a land use district that would allow for that business to happen. As a business is not a use in a residential rural lot. So the subject parcel is located within the City of Brooks intermunicipal development plan. So if council decides to give this land use amendment first reading, then we will present it to the City of Brooks for comment. And then it will also be circulated to adjacent landowners and required referral agencies. The applicant has been working with Shanna Lee on the development permit process. So before they can get the development permit, they need to rezone. And they did get approval from Alberta Transportation for this. So Alberta Transportation is okay with it. Staff is recommending that first reading be given to bylaw 2019-21 to redesignate these subject lands from residential to business. And sorry, I just noticed there is a typo in my recommendation. So to change it from residential rural district to business rural district, there is no residential business district. So I'll have to change that. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there questions? Councillor Johnson, please. Maria, where is this?
It is south, right south of Castles, or south of Castles Road. This land is owned by Bert Peters. Mario's Electric owns the land south of it, the ag parcel. Can I say that? just west of town.
Okay, Councillor Arner.
So this is a year-round market, a flea market. Is it an indoor, outdoor, or is it just for weekends, or is it always out in the open?
They have constructed a few accessory buildings, and I don't know exactly what that is, if it's sea cans or lean-tos, but they have some buildings that they store items in, and then it's also outside. So it's a little bit of everything.
Councillor Crystal.
At what point, I mean, obviously the neighbors know this has been going on. I've noticed it, and I live way on the west side. So at what point do we engage the neighbors, or have they been engaged?
If council decides to give first reading to this land use amendment, then we will circulate to the neighboring landowners. And then they'll have the opportunity to speak at a public hearing. So that would be first reading, and then public hearing would be the next step. And then once the public hearing is done, council could go second and third reading. Then the land use district would be rezoned to business rural district. And then at that point, then we can go with the development permit application.
Go ahead.
Follow-up question to that. Can you answer, did this come to you as a complaint, or was this, yes, thank you.
Any further questions or comments? Greg, please.
So just clarification for myself. Are we looking at approving, is the subject property the property with a house? Is it included in the rest of the, to the west of that? Is it all the same owner? Or are we subdividing off the, just that house portion? Is that the flea market? Or is the flea market on the west portion of that longer piece there? And if it is that zone commercial right now? Because I think they're storing trailers, they're storing, I think there's household storage there, been like that for some time, 10 years or 8 years or something like that.
So good question. This lot right here is zone business. That is the lot that has storage on it, and it does have a development permit. This lot here, it's not the same owner, but the applicant does own this parcel. So they're renting that land right now. And the flea market is located in where the house is, so where they're living. And I think it's important to note too that there's several houses in this area. So it's a bit of a mixed bag. All those houses would be considered legal non-conforming because they are on a business zoned lot, but those houses can continue to be there until such time that they want to change something. And then we'd have to look at changing that. If I may, back to the complaint, this didn't come to our department via a complaint from an adjacent landowner. It was mentioned from outside sources.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Unruh. Oh, and then, yeah, go ahead.
So then it's going to business rural district, and there is a home there, but they can live in there then, but so it's not residential at all. It's all business now. Going to be business rural. Okay.
Councillor Johnson, you have a question?
Sorry, Maria, so many planning questions here, but what is the difference between a home business in a setting as opposed to a business designation?
That's also a good question. So we do have two home-based business designations, I guess, in our land use bylaw. Home-based business 1 is a business that's strictly out of the home. It would be bookkeeping or hairdressing. That really doesn't have an effect on the adjacent landowners. Those types of businesses do not require a development permit. They can just go ahead and do their thing. Home-based business 2 is something that has a little bit more of effect on adjacent lands, but is mostly done within the confines of the principal building. So there might be a little bit of outdoor storage or, some parking of commercial vehicles, but the nuisance factor is very low. In this case, because they're wanting people to come to their business and there's an increase in traffic, they've increased the number of outbuildings on their property. It's just a little bit more than the home-based business.
Thank you for that. Any further questions?
So in that whole strip of properties, why would that one property have been left as, like, not been used and zoned the same as the other ones? Was that a decision at some other point, or just it's whether people apply?
I did look into the history of this, and these lots were all zoned, I should just make sure I'm telling you the right thing. Sorry, I don't have the history in front of me, but they were zoned, I believe, light industrial, quite a few land use bylaws ago. And so when the land use bylaw was updated, I believe in 2013, these were rezoned this way. And I don't have a reasoning behind why that one lot was left residential, except for that could have been at that time the only parcel that didn't have an associated business with it. But I'm speculating on that. I'm not exactly sure what the rationale was behind there.
Thank you. Any other questions, Councillor Chrisman?
No question. I was thinking that I would make a motion to pass first reading and let it go to the public and see what we have.
Okay, thank you. We have a motion to go to first reading. All in favor, please indicate. That's carried unanimously. Thank you. Thank you, Maria. Next. Okay, we do have some delegations coming to us this morning, but I don't think they're in attendance yet. So let's move to item 9.1, the Agriculture Fieldman's report. Will, please, here.
Thank you, Reeve Dorkson. Council, good morning again, Matt. So as you can see, Todd, he had prior engagements and not here today, so I will be giving his Ag Fieldman report. He did put all this in writing for me, so all I have to do is read it. I don't know if I can get his sense of humor across or not, but we'll go with it. So it's been quite some time since we've had a fall quite this drawn out. Like everyone, we have finished a few extra projects that typically get buried in snow before this time of year. One of them is mowing. For a number of years now, we haven't been able to complete our roadside mowing because we've been snowed out. This year we were. Rentals for the year. So our seed drills. No-till drills, we have 2 of them, put in 2,885 acres. 46 different producers. Conventional drill, it's a 25-foot press drill. 1,466 acres, 16 different producers use that drill. Our brilliant seeders, mostly for grass seed, 314 acres with 8 different producers. Livestock equipment, scale rental, 10 producers. Loading, shooting panels, 11 producers, and our calf table, 5 producers. We do have sprayers that we rent out. So we have a boomless sprayer, 6 rentals, a 3-point hitch sprayer, 1 rental, and our quad sprayer, 1 rental on that. Predator traps. So we have, or not predator, pest control traps. So we have skunk and magpie traps that we rent out. For the skunk traps, they do, will also catch raccoons. We've had 13 renters and they've used the traps for 104 days. Magpie, we only had 1 renter for 27 days. So with trap rentals, we've kind of shot ourselves in the foot because we have been selling traps in the past over the years, so I think our rentals go down because more people are purchasing. Chemicals, strychnine, so that was the end of strychnine, but we did sell 3,805 bottles to 113 different producers. And phostoxin, we sold 21 flasks to 2 different producers. Barbecue rentals, again with COVID, last year and this year have been down substantially, only 8 rentals for the barbecue. So Emerson Bridge Park, we kept open a little longer this season, and we've had some wonderful patrons take advantage of this. All in all, a successful season at the park and happy with the usage. We've increased our occupancy rate since 2019 from 32% to 52% occupancy. Friday and Saturday nights continue to be the most popular with 80% occupancy. With the extended weather, we also had quite a few after-season campers in the park. Slowed down after Thanksgiving, but we still have 1 unit in the park. We continually to get questions about our previous CCIP program. Anecdotally, we have received some reports from hunters that there's still a pretty healthy population of coyotes this fall. We'll know more. We will do a coyote count in January again. As long as there's snow on the ground, we need snow to do the count, and then we will have more information for you at that time. The seed plant inspections, Todd went out and did these. We have 3 of them in the county. They all received passing grade. Each fall they are inspected to ensure the equipment is operating properly, they are cleaned regularly, and have systems in place to reduce the risk of spreading weeds and pests from one seed lot to another. Environmental farm plans, which used to be done by Catherine Hawk, who's now on maternity. Todd took over doing them. He took the training for it. And so over the year, he has done 5 of them and 3 in the queue to be completed this fall. So if you know of anyone that would like to go through the process or simply know more about it, feel free to have them contact us. And he just wanted to make note, let you guys know that the 2022 Provincial ASB Conference is currently being planned as an in-person event at the Westin Hotel in Edmonton. The ASB Conference is an important learning opportunity as well as a chance to move resolutions from municipal to other forms of government. As we get more information on it, we will keep you all apprised. Thank you.
Thank you, Will. Are there any questions? Councillor Johnson, please.
Good morning. I just noted the 3-point hitch sprayer and the quad sprayer only had 1 renter this year. Is that a typical renter rate or is it lower?
It's, they haven't been a high rental. It's a little lower than normal. We usually get 3 to 5 a season, but they all have come down over the past number of years.
Thank you. Councillor Unruh.
Do we know what month the provincial ASB conference will take place? You may not know the date, but do you know the month?
I believe that will be the first part of February again.
Any other questions? Seeing none, a motion to accept the report. Councillor Johnson, Neil Johnson, moves to accept the Agriculture Fieldman's report. All in favor, please indicate. That's carried. Thank you, Will.
Thank you.
Item number 10. Yeah, we'll move to item number 10.1, road closure approval to proceed. Who's presenting that, Maria? You're back, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. This is an approval to proceed for a road closure application. So the process for road closure applications is we get an application at the county for a road closure. In this case, the applicant would like to install a pivot and irrigate the road allowance that's next to the land. Once we receive approval from council that this is something that you'd like to take into the process, then we need to get Alberta transportation approval. And then this needs to go through first reading, public hearing, and second and third reading for closure. In this instance, like I had said, the applicant would like to install a new pivot. This pivot will be installed within the required setbacks, but they do want to irrigate and incorporate the road closure or the road allowance with their pivot. The adjacent landowner does access his land off of Highway 544. If that were to ever change, we could allow access through that existing road allowance through the provisions of a lease agreement. There is the option to sell the road allowance or set up a lease agreement. Staff or administration always recommends lease. Once you sell, then you don't have the ability to build a road there in the future without purchasing it back, I suppose. So the lease agreement, if council would like to proceed with the closure and lease, then the lease agreement as per county policy is $100 per year for every mile or portion thereof. And we ask that the applicant pay for 10 years at a time. So that's $1,000 at the time that they sign the lease agreement. So there's a few options. Council could approval to proceed with this application for a road closure and lease. We could provide approval to proceed with this application as a road closure and sale. And that value of the land would be set by the assessor if that's the way that council would like to proceed, or you could refuse the road closure application. And it is recommended by administration that council give approval to proceed with the road closure and lease of the portion of the road allowance that's adjacent to the southwest of 13-2014 to facilitate the new pivot. Thanks.
Thank you, Maria. Are there questions? Councillor Johnson.
How many acres does it involve? Or hectares, whatever you want to use?
I should know that. So it is, every quarter is 4 acres. So I believe this one would be just over an acre. But that's an estimate and I can get an exact for you.
I really think the lease agreement is the only way to go because once you sell it, it's gone. And you have to be careful closing road allowances. You never know what's coming 20, 30 years down the road. I would certainly support the lease.
Thank you. Councillor Chrisman.
Just so you know, in our information, it's 1.2 acres now.
Okay.
Question, have the neighbors been contacted, engaged yet, Maria? That seems to be a theme for me today.
No, and I appreciate that because it is important. So if council would like to move forward with this, then the adjacent landowners will be engaged at the time of the public hearing. So they'll be circulated all the information and have the chance to comment and object if they feel they need to.
Thank you. Any other questions? Councillor Coop, please.
I'm always asking for things that happened in the past, but if for some reason we were wanting to build a road through there in, say, year 7, what happens with your lease agreement? Like are we able to break a lease agreement like that, or how does that work?
There is a provision in the lease agreement that the county would be able to utilize that land at any, when they desire, but notice will have to be given to the applicant. Yeah, okay, yeah, thanks.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions, Councillor Short?
Hi. Looking at the pivot plan map, it doesn't look like the pivot overlaps the road allowance. So I'm curious as to what's the reasoning behind leasing that land? Is it so that they can farm it and spray over it, or do they want to put that pivot on that road allowance? That's about the only thing I've got to ask about it.
So the EID has, not recently, but they ensure that the applicant or the person who wants to install the pivots have contacted the county prior to allowing any further any irrigation or further construction of irrigation on the road allowance. So I believe that this was designed so that it was specifically on the landowner's land. If the county would give approval to allow this individual to irrigate the road allowance, then they would also make provisions to allow for that to happen.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Christman?
So my only hang-up about making this, before I make the motion or to consider the motion, is the fact that we have not contacted the adjacent landowner. I'm putting myself in their position, and would I feel like something is being done to them before they were consulted? We had this conversation other times, and we always say, go to your neighbors first, talk to your neighbors. So can you comment on my hesitation?
Go ahead, please.
You bet. So that's why road closures are presented first to council as an approval to proceed. So then we get a feel for how council would like to proceed with this before we even create the bylaw and do first reading. So if council is interested in proceeding with this, then we would go into the public hearing, or we would set a date for the public hearing. So say you approve this, then our next step will be to fan this out to the adjacent landowners and get any comments from them. If there's some major objections, then council has the ability to not pass first reading when it comes to you again.
Did you say that the adjacent landowner does use that road to access his property?
No, right now, and I will pull up that map again.
Sorry, I missed maybe the detail there. But...
No, that's okay. So right now, the landowner accesses via an approach right here, I believe. He accesses off the highway 544. Because this is a provincial highway, it's usually good to have an alternate source of access. So in that case, if something would happen, and this is just, keeping in mind all the scenarios that could in the next 50 years, they would be able to, through the provisions of the lease agreement, go through the road allowance if for some reason they couldn't access through the highway anymore.
Great, thank you. Councillor Johnson?
I'm quite familiar with these in the South in Scandia area, so I move to approve to proceed with this.
Okay, a motion to approve with the road closure proposal. Any further questions? All in favor of the motion? Oh, sorry, one question here.
This would be the lease, right? Number one
lease.
option? Okay. Sorry.
Clarified? All in favor of the motion that we proceed with the lease, please indicate. That's carried. Thank you. Thank you, Maria. At this point, we'll move back up to item 8.1, the HALO presentation, and welcome Paul Carolan to our meeting. Welcome to our meeting, Paul. While you're getting set up, maybe we'll just have introductions around the table so you know who you're talking to a little closer. Start with Councillor Johnson in the corner there.
Amanda Philpott, Division 8.
Good morning, Ellen Unruh. I represent the countryside around the village of Rosemary. Welcome.
Good morning, Greg Screever, Division 5, Lake No Resort and Castles.
Morning. I'm from the west side of the county, Division 6.
I'm Arno Dirksen from the North, Division 9 and GEM area.
Welcome back, Paul. We're familiar. Matt Fensky, County Administrator.
Good morning, Holly Johnson, Division 4, Scandia, Rainier, and Bow City.
Good morning, Adina Scandrup, Division 2, Tilly and area.
Good morning, Dan Short, Division 1, Rolling Hills.
Hi, Division 3, I'm Lynette Kopp, that's the Patricia Millicent area.
Thank you for having me.
Button to talk.
So I won't take a lot of your time. I know that there are a number of new councillors here today, and I want to just take a few minutes to give you a little bit of background on HALO and who we are, and hopefully provide some additional context as to our request for an ongoing funding arrangement with the County of Newell. But I thought it would be appropriate to just bring everybody up to speed to the same level. So we'll start off with our similar presentation to last time. So HALO has been around since 2007. We've been operating a helicopter out of Medicine Hat since that time. For the first 12 years of our existence, we operated what we would consider a rescue helicopter modified into a medevac role, a single-engine Bell 206 helicopter. It's been out to this part of the world quite a bit, not only on medevac missions, but also on search and rescue missions quite a lot in Dinosaur Provincial Park and in and around Lake Newell. The limitations around that helicopter were a couple of fold. One was performance. In high temperatures, it had limited lift ability, so we were looking at the lightest person possible, the lightest pilots, and only taking as little equipment as we possibly could. And we were also limited in not being able to land at elevated helipads, which meant that while the helicopter was capable from a range perspective of flying all the way to Calgary, it wasn't allowed to land at the elevated helipad at Foothills Hospital, and therefore that meant a lot of rendezvous either with STARS out of Calgary took place, or we had to go to the international airport and that person then had to be transported by ground. That drastically increases the transport time when you start thinking about driving from the Calgary International Airport to Foothills Hospital. So our new helicopter is a BK-117 twin-engine helicopter that does meet all of Transport Canada's regulations in order to land at those elevated helipads, which has made a significant difference to calls for service and our program. HALO is a grassroots organization, though. We have a dedicated operational model that means the helicopter is there and waiting for an emergency call to come in. So we do primarily focus on air ambulance work and being able to respond to those accidents and farm accidents and different things that require someone to be able to be transported to that next level of care. However, because the helicopter is so highly capable and our pilots and our crews are so experienced, it also means that we're available to assist with other things. We have been, as I mentioned, on a number of search and rescue incidences. One of our most followed social media posts was a recent search in and around the Brooks area and in the county of Newell for a missing girl. We get a lot of coverage and a lot of response from the public when we participate in those things. We're also available for law enforcement. In fact, we are in conversations with the RCMP about further being able to support their mandate to provide comprehensive law enforcement to rural Alberta and disaster emergency response. We're all very aware, as I'm sure Council is, with what's happening in British Columbia currently. There are people that are paying out of pocket to be flown out of cutoff areas. Having these types of resources at your fingertips allows you as a county to be able to support those types of evacuations and community responses beyond what's necessary for air ambulance work. Our helicopter is completely dedicated to emergency services, so we don't do any oil field work, forestry work, or power line work. We are there waiting for that call to come in. Much like emergency services, I have an emergency services background in search and rescue and paramedicine. We never want to be called. We train extremely hard to be ready when we're needed, but it's that catch-22 when you get into emergency services that you know when the pager goes off, and I use that loosely because there aren't any anymore, but when the pager goes off, it's someone else is having the worst day of their life, and you need to be ready to respond to that as necessary. Much like a fire department, and I think this is an important consideration for Council, the most expensive part is having us. If we weren't available, if we were off doing oil field work or forestry work, we wouldn't necessarily be able to come off that mission to assist with an emergency services call. And so having that dedicated resource is the most expensive part of any program like us, just like a fire department. The apparatus, the building, the trained personnel is the most expensive part of this. Flying is the most inexpensive part. Represents less than 20% of our entire operating budget. Some statistics, most of these will be refreshers for those that were here in September, but it just gives you a sense as sort of the bordering counties around Medicine Hat's response area and Cypress County in particular, what the percentage of calls for service are. This is all inclusive, so this is search and rescue, air ambulance work, intra-facility transfers, which is hospital to hospital, as well as law enforcement, although those are very limited in the total number. So in 2018, you see that the County of Newell represented approximately 11% of our calls for service, a little higher in 2019, and 2019 was a very high search and rescue call volume. I know that the helicopter was at Lake Newell 3 or 4 times that year alone, and so that probably represents a significant portion of that increase, because we'll see from 2020 and 2021 that we've dropped down to that 10% approximately, which is pretty close. The 17 is a bit of an anomaly. 2021 is year to date as of October 31st, and when I was here in September, it was 7%, so we've just seen a little bit more of a balancing as the year goes on as far as the calls for service. I think one of the questions that came up last time from Council was, what's the distribution of those services? So this is everywhere. This isn't just Newell, but this represents the number of calls. So 75% of our calls are air ambulance scene calls, so responding to a scene, whether that's a medical or trauma call, along with ground EMS and usually fire resources. 13% search and rescue and 12% interfacility transfers, which again is when someone's in a hospital and they need to go to a higher level of care. Traditionally, that means Medicine Hat to Calgary and or Lethbridge to Calgary. However, there are missions that represent calls to Oyen to Calgary and to Brooks to Calgary. I think the most important thing about HALO is it's a community level response to a need. We've been around for a long time, and we want to be here because it's not accessible for us to have a machine responding out of Calgary. The flight time is approximately 40 to 45 minutes, and if we can wait that long for a helicopter, we really need to be starting to ask ourselves if we need it in the first place. Coming out of Medicine Hat, our response time to here today would have been about 25 minutes, so it is significantly faster when you're talking about life and death situations. I thought I had another slide here, actually. Let's skip past it, maybe. I didn't. I apologize. I think I might have had that one closed off. I did want to talk a little bit about, as far as the County of Newell is concerned, over 75% of the county is within a 40-minute flight time for Halo, and the entire county is within a 1-hour flight time for council. So all the way out to the farthest northwest portion, you're within an hour of our flight time, and we can still make Calgary. So the helicopter has a 2-hour flight window. So that means that we don't have to stop for a refuel, which with our helicopter, by the time you come off cruising altitude, land, shut down, fuel, restart, and get back, you're looking at no less than 15 to 20 minutes. So you're adding that to your operational requirement. So the ability for the helicopter to cover the entire county without a refuel is very, very valuable. So that is the bulk of my presentation. I remain available for questions, which I think is probably the most important part of me being here today. And I did include the presentation in your council package. So,
thank you, Paul. Are there questions from Council? Neil, please.
Do you have a good working relationship with STARS?
So we have had a number of conversations with STARS about partnerships, and they do publicly consider us a valuable regional resource. They know that they're very busy in their area, and they do respond to BC as well as calls within the core and around Calgary. And so having us out in this area does provide an assurance that there are resources available in the event that they're already busy or unavailable to fly due to weather or maintenance. I recognize that that council meetings are public and that they're taped, and so I will tell you that we have an extremely good relationship with STARS. I speak with their COO, Mike Lamakia, quite regularly about operational partnerships and things like that. But the answer back from STARS, Councillor, is always it's a government decision. STARS is a nonprofit, but just like we are, and they're hoping to get to 50% contribution from the province for their Alberta operations, and so they are never going to be in a position where they are prepared to contract us or help contribute to our fundraising goals to make sure that our operation is viable. So we work very closely with them. We've been on scene calls that require more than one helicopter with them on a number of occasions, and we try to make sure that we recognize their skills. However, Halo is not trying to be STARS. STARS, from their own statistics, have over 60% of their calls for service are hospital calls now. And so less to the scene, less supporting those local ground resources and fire resources. And so Halo is dedicated to making sure that we bring that level of care to the person as rapidly as possible. So we have a different approach for our models, and we work with on-duty Alberta Health Service paramedics. However, we do recognize that we may need our own in the future, but we've tried to run the most lean and affordable program we can to make it attainable not only for regional municipalities, but also for the corporations that make our program possible.
Thank you. So what does that mean exactly? That means that ground service ambulance would attend with the helicopter or would travel with the helicopter for transport in emergency.
Yeah, it's a great question, Reeve. So there's a number of issues I could get into around ambulance dispatch, and I'm sure you're dealing with them within the county as well. We respond with an on-duty, so a ground ambulance crew from Medicine Hat. So they respond to the airport with us and fly with us instead of taking their ambulance. So we're bringing 2 advanced care paramedics to every scene call we attend. However, Alberta Health Services right now usually wait until a local ground resource is on scene before they dispatch the helicopter. We are advocating for a change to that policy because the greatest asset of the helicopter is its speed and its need not to follow traditional roads. It can go as the crow flies and go directly to scene. So there are a number of columns happening within advocacy around funding for Halo, but we also want to make sure the system is the best system it can be for all of the people within our response area. However, we need to get permanent funding before we can try to make changes from within. So there are a number of things that can be improved. One of the recommendations out of the provincial HEMS review, which was released this fall, was to return helicopter dispatch to EMS, so at the Southern Communications Centre likely, which likely would mean not only an increased call for service for Halo, because we're no longer being filtered through the STARS side of house, but also it would mean that we would probably get dispatched faster to support those ground resources. The last piece I think is important as you deal with those types of ground resource availabilities. I know from working with EMS that they're often sent to Calgary, whether it's with a patient or whether it's for a transfer, and you very rarely get them back. Alberta Health Services is using them within Calgary while they're there, and so if an ambulance leaves one of the rural communities or Brooks to do that, right now you're not getting them back, whereas we're bringing a crew with us, they're staying with us the entire time, and we're bringing them back to Medicine Hat. So that leaves your ambulance in your community, which is an important piece. We're not only requesting an additional increase in funding from the County of Newell, but we're also requesting an ongoing advocacy with the Government of Alberta. The County of Newell is extremely well respected, and you have a lot of influence with the Government of Alberta, and so we need you to continue to make those arguments that a community-based response, which includes Halo, is the best thing for your citizens.
Thank you. Councillor Crispin and Councillor Unruh, please.
Hi, Paul.
Hi.
My question is, who sends the air ambulance out? Like, who makes that call?
Yeah, great question. I love talking about this stuff. I used to be a paramedic, so I would have to check in the County of Newell, but there's two systems. One is your person calling 911 gets a regional dispatch center. It could be Medicine Hat, it could be Foothills, it could be depending on who you contract. When you call 911, you get the traditional, do you need police, fire, or EMS? If you say EMS, you are transferred as a caller to the Southern Communications Centre, which is in South Calgary. You then go through all the same questions about what the scene is and what you need and what you're asking for. That other dispatch center may send the local resources, fire response or RCMP if that's appropriate, but you're now talking to an ambulance dispatcher for Alberta Health Services. That was part of the centralized plan that Minister Shandro employed that's been debated across the province since that time. Once you get through a number of criteria questions around what the situation is at that particular incident, a number of flags can be checked. Some of them are automated, distance from a hospital, how long till ALS care, a number of those types of things might check a box automatically. But generally speaking, that dispatcher is deciding how to triage that call based on the information that's being provided. If helicopter response is warranted, not approved, but warranted, that dispatcher calls the STARS Emergency Link Center at the Calgary International Airport. You as a person do not have to talk to that third part, but that's what's happening in the background. STARS currently dispatches all helicopters in Alberta, including Halo in Medicine Hat and Hero in Fort McMurray. Very long response to your question, but I try to be very comprehensive. Is that clear?
Yes.
If not complicated?
And I can see some complications there, for sure. I sympathize with your...
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Councillor Unruh, and Councillor Scan.
Just for your information, next week we're going up to Edmonton and speaking with the ministers. And I know that Wheatland County has a resolution bringing forward, and hopefully it's all about these ambulance issues and placements and capacity. And so anyway, we're working on it.
Okay, thank you.
Just a question, where does your funding primarily come from? Does the Alberta government through AHS provide money to you, plus the municipalities, plus donations from outside sources? What kind of percentage are we looking at here for funding for Halo?
So currently, Halo's budget is $3 million. That's for up to 14 hours a day, not 24/7 yet. And again, that comes from a desire to provide the most comprehensive service for the most affordable cost possible since we began in 2007. Your your question encapsulated the answer. So yes, we receive a little bit of funding from Alberta Health Services. It is variable. It is only on missions they approve, and it's called a fee for service. So they don't contribute anything to the dedicated operational model, which makes the helicopter available to respond when they need us. Last year, it represented less than 6%. And so HALO as an organization is raising 94% of the entire operating budget. We currently receive about, where would we be? We'd be at about 12% from counties and municipalities. We would be 35 to 40% from HALO-initiated efforts, grant applications, fundraising, events that we promote and put on, and also the pandemic did force us to accelerate plans to launch some non-in-person fundraisers, our lottery, which was quite successful, and a cash calendar that's been very successful as well. And then the final percentage would come from corporate sponsorships that we have either ongoing relationships with or one-time donations that seem to continue just based on the relationship. So the model we would like and the model we propose is a public-private partnership, which is what Cypress County based their contribution on, which is public, the provincial government, which we don't currently enjoy, public, the regional municipal government, which we have an exceptional relationship with, and private, which is the foundation. And we've proven we can do our part. We've raised the full value of the program last year, and we will again this year.
Just a clarification, the fundraising that HALO does, what percentage roughly?
35 to 40.
Neil, please. I'm not sure if you can answer this, but how much did Cypress give you?
So Cypress recently gave us $1.15 million, which represented $250,000 in emergency funding based on the lack of ability to fundraise during the pandemic, and a $300,000 contribution for 3 years. Now, Cypress County was one of the strongest advocates for a per capita funding model in Southern Alberta. Again, this is going back a couple of years, but we met with all of the Southern Alberta Reeves and talked about a per capita model. Cypress County's funding is not based on per capita. After a number of conversations, what they decided was they believe so deeply in that one-third model that they looked at their statistics. And if we go back, you'll see that they represent approximately 30% of our calls for service and based their $300,000 per year on 30% of $1 million, which is the county and municipality one-third. Their contribution represents Sorry, I have this. Their contribution currently represents approximately $38 per person in Cypress County. The County of 40 Mile contributes $50,000 annually, and they have another $25,000 annually earmarked once we have a permanent agreement with the Government of Alberta. They thought that tying that obligation was important to an increase. That puts their current contribution per person at $13 per person, and it would go to $20 per person at $75,000. Special areas is about $8 per person. They contribute $25,000 annually.
So by the numbers you had up there, our comparable contribution with those numbers would be about a third of Cypress, because we have 10%, they have 30%.
Yeah, the County of Newell has been a longtime supporter at about $1 per person, so $7,500 per year. My calculations based on the 2021 Vital Signs report from the Community Foundation of Southeastern Alberta was that those are the statistics I'm using for population because the census data isn't out yet. And so, yeah, it works out to about $1 per person from the County of Newell. If you're looking at from the percentage model, if you were to try to consider something around Cypress County, that's correct. You'd be at about $100,000 based on 10% calls for service to the county.
Thanks. Dan, please, go ahead.
Well, that's mostly answers my question. Budget of $3 million puts our 10% usage at a budget of $300,000 per year. So our 1/3 would be $100,000 of that. Where did you say the other 2/3 come from again, or you're hoping to get those 2/3 from?
The other two, sorry?
The other 2/3?
So the other, so 1/3 we've always advocated should come from the province, 1/3 from the foundation. While we've proven our track record that we can raise more than that, it's not truly sustainable. And it does not allow for us to consider things like a different or new helicopter or a hangar of our own that provides more comprehensive delivery services. So 1 million from HALO, 1 million from the regional municipalities. There's 13 in Southern Alberta that we can serve without requiring a refuel, and 1 million from the government of Alberta. I'm hesitant to talk about fixed numbers, however, because we do believe that an arrangement with the government of Alberta will come with a condition that we get our own paramedics. Alberta Health Services currently budget $1.4 million per year for every 24/7 air ambulance crew, so 2 paramedics. So we would have to replace the cost that we're getting the benefit of using their paramedics by hiring our own. So we see a fairly substantial increase in operating costs if we have to add our own paramedics. The second piece, and I'm probably taking longer than you had budgeted for me, but the second piece with paramedics is if we have our own, we might as well be 24/7 because we're going to have them on staff anyway. And then that begins, so then we're looking at exponential growth. So from 3 million to somewhere between 5 and 6 million to provide 24/7 full-time service.
Thank you, Kelly. And then,
So Paul, where I struggle is us as a municipality becoming a fundraiser for donation dollars. So if I come across the table with $100 for you right now, I would receive a tax deductible receipt from you that I would apply to my next income tax. So my struggle is it our role to raise those donation dollars here at the County of Newell and take away my right to receive that tax deduction at the federal level?
Incredible perspective. I think that as people, we have to decide what kind of society we want to live in. And as federally, provincially, or regionally elected governments, you choose to make leadership decisions that deliver a quality of life to your citizens. We rely heavily, probably too heavily, on nonprofit organizations and volunteers. Again, BC is an incredibly relevant and current example, but their search and rescue teams are going 24/7, and those people are away from their jobs and their families and things like that to contribute to a meaningful recovery and help save lives. So again, I think from an emergency services standpoint, with respect, Council has a responsibility to provide access to equitable services for your citizens. And there is a benefit to Council and to the county by making sure that people get the most comprehensive service as fast as possible. We transported a patient from Elkwater who had a stroke and to Calgary directly, and 3 days later they were back at home with their family, getting back to work, paying taxes. And so there is an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure mentality to what we do as well. We've certainly considered that as municipalities increase their contributions, does that affect people's decisions to contribute privately? That's absolutely their final decision, and we actually don't believe that it will. Even if Council represented an increase to HALO on their property tax bill, we still believe that the majority of people who support HALO today would continue to support them into the future.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Cobb?
You touched on the fact that 40 Mile was, the way they worded it was that you were getting your provincial funding as well. Can you just expand how that worked?
So we are going back sort of to the beginning of the pandemic. HALO recognized very quickly that we had been 100% an in-person fundraising organization. We got in front of people, told our story, and got contributions to keep the program going. The pandemic we knew was going to stop that, and so we had an emergency meeting talking about what the future of HALO looked like. There was potential for us to be scaling back just to the single-engine helicopter and then to cease operations completely. Through those conversations, Cypress County and the County of 40 Mile really drove the message through the Southern Alberta mayors and reeves, and and decided on not only emergency funding, but accelerated funding, and then looked at increased funding. The County of 40 Mile as a council decided that they wanted to tie a fiscal responsibility to their increase to the province. And so their motion was they would continue with their annual $50,000, which they've done for a number of years, but they would increase to $75,000 if and when the province provided an operational funding agreement.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Dan, one more quick question, please.
So from your letter of funding request, we gave the $150,000 a year based on the percentages. That will put us paying 1/3 part for the budget. Would it give you, if everyone kept on pace with that level, then your budget would be at $4.5 million. Would that be enough to go 24/7?
It would be very close. There's a number of evolutions of the program where with on-duty Alberta Health Service paramedics, we can go 24/7 and save that additional cost. The next model has always been our own paramedics and 24/7 operations. I do have, at last calculation, I have it at just over $5 million. So it does get us very, very close. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Seeing no other questions, thanks for your presentation here this morning, Paul. We appreciate that, and we will take the information under consideration. Thank you.
Thank you to Council for allowing me the opportunity. I know I wasn't scheduled to be back this quick, but it was good to see the familiar faces and to meet the new ones. So, and thanks, Matt, for organizing it.
Okay, at this point, I think we'll adjust our agenda a little bit as we have already this morning. We'll move to item 8.2, the Southern Alberta Search and Rescue Group. Good news is you found us. Welcome. Oh, isn't that? I'll welcome Representatives Delia Mapstone, Denise Thiessen, and Donna Martin. Please. And maybe while you're taking the presentation, we'll just introduce ourselves, starting over with Councillor Johnson.
Neil Johnson, Division 10.
Welcome, ladies. Amanda Philpott, Division 8.
Good morning, Ellen Unruh, and I represent the area around the village of Rosemary.
Hi, Greg Screever, Division 5, Castles and Lake Noah Resort.
Hi, I'm Kelly Chrisman from Division 6, the west side of the county.
Arnold Dirksen, Division 9, Gem area. Yeah.
Welcome, I am Matt Pensky, the County Administrator.
Good morning, I'm Holly Johnson, representing Division 4, Scandia, Rainier, and Bow City.
Good morning, Dan Short, representing Division 1 in Rolling Hills.
I'm Lynette Kopp, representing Division 3, which is Patricia Millicent.
Welcome. Go ahead. It's we can recognize each other better without the masks. That's good. Morning, Donna.
Yeah. We'll just get you to push the talk button, and then anybody who's in our virtual land can hear what you're saying. So long as your red band is on, we can hear what you're saying. Thanks.
Perfect, thank you. Oh, that is much louder. Okay. So the three of us represent Southeastern Alberta Search and Rescue, a 100% volunteer organization. Okay. CSER has been in existence since 1999, and I'm proud to say that I'm one of the founding members from that time. As I said, it's 100% volunteer, and we have sustained being on call 24/7, 365 days a year for over 20 years. I was actually going to go back and try and count the number of incidents that we have responded to over the past over 21 years, but some of our papers or files are are not digital, so that creates a little bit more of a challenge, but I can tell you that it's in the hundreds. Currently, we average 15 to 30 callouts per year, and these incidents range in any areas from the US border to up north of Oyen, and then actually the next teams are located close to the Bonnyville area, and then Red Deer and Strathmore area. So there's potential that we could go, halfway to Bonnyville, supporting some of the other search and rescue teams within the province. Our volunteers put in 6,500 to 7,500 hours per year volunteering between training, responding to incidents, and then maintaining competency as well as the administrative duties that we perform completely on a 100% volunteer basis as well. We do fall under the Government of Alberta. We're required to, qualify for WCB, that sort of thing. And like an employer, we have to have safety programs and the like in place as well. Provincially, we fall under the Search and Rescue Alberta umbrella group. We have to be a member of that organization, which is basically a board. We have to be a member of that organization in order to be tasked under a search and rescue incident. Federally, we fall under the Search and Rescue Volunteer Association of Canada, who has written CSA standards and done the work to complete that. So we must also train to a CSA standard level. And then federally, we do eventually fall under the Joint Resource Coordination Center, that deploys to major search and rescue incidents, but they also deploy the military and the task forces and that sort of thing as well. Sorry, lost my train of thought. Search and rescue is designated federally to the RCMP for ground and inland water search and rescue, and we need to be tasked by one of those policing agencies for us to be called out, but we are 100% volunteer. There are about 36 groups within the province of Alberta. So I would like to take this time to share with you what we do. So we go out there and we search for lost and missing people. That's one of the things that we do. It could be a child that disappears from the city of Brooks or from a rural acreage out here in the county. It could be a senior missing from a care facility or simply one of their family members' home. It could be a despondent or somebody who's contemplating suicide that has gone out and just is not at home. It could be a hunter that hasn't yet returned from a day of hunting, a hiker that was out exploring, a rancher that was out checking his cattle. We've made most of those calls. You could be a boater or a swimmer on Lake Newell, and I can tell you from personal experience that we've attended several of those. There may be times when it's not safe for our team to deploy, but we still offer consultation services. I am going to talk shortly about the training that we do and the knowledge that we acquire to be able to do this, but we sort of become a leader in our field for what we do. So tasking agencies will actually call us in and ask us where they should search for somebody. So if a despondent goes missing and the tasking agency feels that they could be actually a harm to us, so they don't want to put us in the field, they can bring us in and they can see where should we send our resources to look and why should we do that. And we've followed through with that role as well. We're also trained to do evidence searches for the police, so we take ongoing training from our local policing agencies, including the RCMP and municipal police agencies, so that we follow their rules and protocols as far as finding evidence and what we do to collect it if we're deemed that we need to collect it. And I can tell you that we have done several calls within the city of Brooks and the local municipality and agency, including major crime searches just west of the city of Brooks as well. And we're brought in by those agencies and we put in thousands of hours and some of that stuff. And the reason we're called to do that quite often is because those agencies either don't have the manpower all at one time to come in and do it, but also because we're a specialized resource and really good at what we do. We also do rescue. So in these times of increased technology, we find that there's a lot more people that aren't necessarily what they would call lost. They may not know how to rescue themselves, but they may be able to give a location as to where they are. So we can actually make our way to them and bring them out safely. Or they may be in a predicament where they can't self-rescue, either because of steep terrain, where they need actually ropes or technical rescue to be helped out, or they just can't right themselves mentally. They've gotten themselves into a situation where they just need assistance with that. Even if EMS gets a call where somebody's in an extremely remote situation or they can't get to them, say even on an island in Lake Newell, we're able to come in and deal with that subject until we can get them where EMS can actually respond to them. All of our members have to have standard first aid and level C CPR, but we do have several members that actually have a higher level of first aid, an 80-hour first aid, and we actually carry medical and trauma equipment as well. We can only act within our scope, and we don't do services to a paramedical level, but we do have the capability of taking a paramedic with us if we need to as well. One of the other capacities that we act in are disaster management. We can limit access to areas, and we've done that several times during the floods within Medicine Hat, where we've been tasked by the municipality and the police to follow through where they've done evacuations and we need to help them limit access to areas. They don't have enough staff to man the barricades, so they'll assign one staff member to 3 or 4 barricades where they have our people in our uniform at those barricades, and only when we run into problems do we then need to call that officer over. Initially, we're a quick resource on site. So even in the event of a tornado, the EMS resources, although they have many resources they can call, locally they can become overwhelmed very, very quickly. So we are a resource that can be called in, and because of the ICS structures that we work under, we're able to function readily with these agencies, and we actually work with these agencies and talk ongoingly so that we're prepared to do that. Some of the other incidents that we have responded to, like I mentioned, floods in the Medicine Hat area and some of the overland flooding in Cypress County a few years ago. We've responded to wildland fires, helping out with evacuations. Years ago, we responded, and that's the picture you see up on the screen, to the tornado at Pine Lake, and we had members respond there as well, and we went in and searched for people within the debris fields. Each of our personnel will have the safety equipment necessary and the training to do these jobs. We've responded to train derailments and downed aircraft. And from the downed aircraft that occurred, I believe it was 2 years ago now, in southeastern Alberta, we were there from basically call out searching for the downed aircraft right through to the end when it was turned over to the coroner's office, and we received a kudo from Transportation Canada as to how well it was done. As I said, we do have ICS training. All of our members must have ICS 100 training. There are several of our members that have ICS 200 training, some that have ICS 300 training, and we do have people up to level 400 training as well. So that is definitely something that we could be tasked or used by your county, is disaster management. We were actually put on standby during the pandemic by Brooks and Newell Fire in case they needed help delivering meals or delivering medications to different places around the county and the city. So we were on standby for that. We were not deployed in the end, but they definitely put us on standby. So, incident support. CSER is a self-contained team. We can basically be brought in, given a task, and we'll take care of it completely by ourselves, and end by giving an incident file, a file of paperwork, whether it be digital or paper, back to whoever tasked us. We usually have between 40 and 60 trained volunteers that are ready to be on hand. As I said, each one of these people will have at least ICS 100 and standard first aid and level C CPR. We do carry liability insurance as well as equipment insurance as well. The Government of Canada through SARVAC, or the Search and Rescue Volunteer Association of Canada, does provide us insurance for this, and we personally, or our team, insures our vehicles and our equipment as well. We are also covered once we're tasked either for training or for an incident by the Workmen's Compensation Board. Currently, we have 4 vehicles. We have a half-ton truck that was donated to us several years ago. We have a tech truck that we were able to purchase from the City of Medicine Hat at a reduced rate when they were getting rid of one of their fleet vehicles. And we recently were overjoyed to have gotten a really high personal donation from an individual and received a matching government grant, and we purchased 2 new 3/4-ton trucks. We have a mobile command post trailer, and this can actually be seconded by an agency if you need to use it. So if you had a location here where you had a disaster management event or a disaster event, you could second that trailer, either manned or unmanned, to use for your event as well. We have an equipment trailer that holds our UTV and some of our other equipment as well. In that trailer, we have a 6-person UTV with a patient transport that has the ability with a jump seat to carry a paramedic, even using an IV pole and an IV with a patient. We have found 5 mountain bikes, a litter and wheel, and many, many other small items that we bring with us to an event. Here you'll actually see a picture of our command post. We have trained and experienced incident commanders, some that have over 20 years of experience responding to various types of incidents that I've described prior to this. Each incident that we respond to is documented and includes a safety plan. So one of the major things that we do, and the reason we exist, is ground search. And we ground search many, many different areas. Many of you will have heard about the 6-year-old girl this fall that went missing in Elkwater. We were boots on the ground to that. Worked very closely along with the volunteer fire departments. We keep close with our partner agencies because we rely on each other to do some of this stuff. In order to be one of these ground search and rescue people, we take about 60 hours of training just to be boots on the ground in the field. And like I said before, this training has to meet CSA standard as well. On top of that, once you complete your 60 hours of training, we have a competency that you must have to stay qualified as well. We also have, each one of our members have had a criminal record check with a vulnerable sector search completed as well, and that's done currently every 3 years by the RCMP. So after we've done the basic training, there's many, many other facets that people can do while they're there. And one of my passions, I can tell you, is actually tracking. Tracking is one of the skills, if you learn it, can actually provide incredible information to a search manager or an incident commander. There may be a young child that has gone missing, and if we can get a direction of travel, we can actually start to focus our resources. So on a call out, if we get 20 of our members responding, if you had to start searching 10 or 12 kilometer sections, that's a very, very large area. So there's a lot of science behind search and rescue, and this is one of the skills that we can use to narrow area down so we can focus our resources effectively. To train in tracking, you take about 20 hours of training initially, and then you need to complete between 30 and 60 hours to stay competent and increase your skill in your field. In 2013, through donations, we were able to purchase a shallow draft jet boat with sonar capability. It comes with operators who not only, of course, have their boating license, but we have many operators that actually have swiftwater boat operation skills, either trained on the South Saskatchewan River or up on the North Saskatchewan River and its tributaries, because we do have swiftwater around here. If you recall, a year and a half ago, there was some Hutterite girls or Hutterite kids that went missing on the St. Mary River, and I can tell you that we responded to that call with our boat. We have been on many incidents on Lake Newell, and as you guys know, because you're around here all of the time, Lake Newell can get some pretty big water on it pretty fast. I've been at Lake Newell when the wind has been between 0 and 10 kilometers an hour, and it's a really pleasant place to be on a hot day. And I've been on Lake Newell when it's had 20-kilometer-hour winds on it, and you're fighting to go over 6-foot swells. I've been on that lake in many capacities. We've been involved in many recovery operations on that lake. Currently, because we're not a lights and sirens agency, but they are working on that at the provincial level, we would not likely make it from our area where we base out of the Medicine Hat area to Lake Newell to do a rescue unless it's ongoing. We would certainly do our best to try. We do have a current member, Donna, who lives in this area, and she's absolute great support, and we can only endeavor to increase that. Years ago, we did actually have a satellite part of Caesar here as well, but it wasn't sustainable, you know, at that time with the people, but something we're willing to take a look at as well for diversity. On top of that, we have members that take swiftwater rescue training. You know, like I said, it may not seem like we have a lot of swiftwater here, but if you look at the local rivers in the spring, they actually become quite swift. We also have a lot of irrigation canals, and they can be extremely challenging. We've also done recoveries off of some of the irrigation canals in the past 20 years. But not only that, we do end up working around a lot of water, and part of it is to keep our members safe. So we make sure that we have members that are trained in this and other safe aspects around water so that we can not only, you know, rescue other people, but we can keep our members safe as well. I talked a little bit earlier about rescuing people off a slope. When people go missing, you know, there may be somebody just has a sprained ankle and they can't walk up or down a slope. It may not be much of a slope, it may be only a 15-degree slope, but it's necessary to secure a safety line to bring that subject up safely. Or we may have a situation where we have a 40 to 60-degree slope and the person is extremely injured or incapacitated. We have the ability to put them into a litter and man our people safely up and down that kind of a slope to help the person get the person to safety or to EMS. Our equine team is currently in the rebuild phase. It is an incredibly valuable resource in the terrain that we live in. If you can imagine searching some of the fields just west of Brooks, between here and the really nice bathrooms that are west of town, if you look on the north side of the highway, there's a vast, vast area out there, and in the springtime when that grass grows tall, you could actually, before it's grazed, lose a child in there or lose something. From a horse, we've done some probability of detection exercises where they've picked up golf-sized pencils out of tall grass, so they have a different perspective. When our members choose to be part of the equine team, they must certify as a horse and rider team, and they bring their own horse and their own horse trailer to the picture for this. As I said, we take 60 hours of basic training just to become a searcher, and they must meet or exceed CSA standards. Search managers, as I said, and we have several experienced search managers, take at least another minimum 40 hours of training just to become a search manager. There's a lot of science and a lot of learning behind this. I actually had a call from an RCMP officer this morning who's currently taking the course out of town, and he had several questions for me, and he just said, I would have never known what kind of training you guys do to actually do this. It's incredible. We must maintain competency on that as well by working through incidents and training monthly for that. There is a science to searching and to search managing. We have lost person behavior, terrain analysis, probability of area, probability of detection. The list goes on and on and on. Once we've searched more than one operational period in an area, we then have cumulative probability of detection and that sort of thing, probability of areas that we can calculate. As noted on the previous few slides, each of the specialty teams require training and competency of skill to keep going. So I mentioned at the beginning that we have to be tasked by a police agencies in the capacity of search because it's designated by the Government of Canada to the RCMP for inland water and ground search and rescue. We must be called for actual search by a police agency. So if Donna's young granddaughter goes missing, Donna can't call us out to be part of that search. The call must be made to 911 through the police, and they must task us, and that's mandated through the government. Through disaster management, that role can expand. We can be called out by municipalities, counties, fires, and fire departments to help in those capacities. Quite often in a park's office or even in a search capacity will initiate us, but that's only because they're then making a call to the RCMP as well or to the municipal police to make sure that the circle is complete. So the earlier we get called out, and I can tell you that there's a direct link to the quicker a resource is called to how fast the incident is resolved. And we actually have an expanding circle in a presentation that I do for some of the tasking agencies where a young child goes missing, and the circle keeps expanding through the discussion, and even how much that circle increases during our 15-minute kind of conversation. So if a young child goes missing and they're gone for 2 hours and they walk at approximately 5 kilometers an hour, now some people will say that a young child doesn't walk 5 kilometers an hour, but if you've ever seen a child holding the hand of a mom walking down a mall or walking down a street, the mom doesn't necessarily slow down and walk for the child. What are they doing? They're walking their speed and that child's running to catch up. So yes, a child can go 5 kilometers an hour. If we do the math on that, pi r squared, if that child is gone for 2 hours, we potentially have 314 square kilometers to search. That is a vast, vast area. So I can tell you there's a direct link to how quickly a resource gets called, and we respond to quite often what the end point is. So we try and push to get called out very quickly. Then we employ resources like our tracking teams and those sorts of things so that we can focus the resources even closer in an area. We have regional partners, and you actually just heard from Halo. We do work with Halo. We work on them with hover exit. So if we get a call, say on the banks of one of the rivers or in some ravine where you can't access the person, we can actually jump out of a helicopter when it's not even on the ground, and we do work with them for that. We can also hot load a helicopter, whether it be Halo or the RCMP helicopter or even a STARS helicopter, where that helicopter touches down, we go while it's still, in revolution and ready to go. We can throw our stuff into that helicopter and take off right away and get to the patient that we need to get to. I believe, unless it's changed, that there's actually no other agencies that have the ability to do that, whether it be police or EMS. We also work with our regional fire departments, and I can tell you in this area, we have done a lot of work with Newell and Brooks Fire. Several trainings on Lake Newell. We've discussed ice rescue, various other capacities as well. We haven't been out generally as far as Rosemary and some of those areas, but would be certainly willing to look at that as well. We have been up to Oyed. We have been down to, 40 Mile and all those places as well. With volunteer, we just kind of do as much as we can with that, but we're definitely willing to work with any of those agencies. This, I'm going to turn it over to Denise to continue.
Okay, go ahead.
So I'm the treasurer, so I get to talk about the money part. So our tasking agencies do pay us a little bit. Actually, the RCMP is the only one that reimburses us for our fuel expenses and meals. If we go out to help the fire department in Brooks or in the county, we don't get reimbursed for the fuel. It's only the RCMP that will actually reimburse our costs for that. Do you mind clicking the next? Thanks. So Caesar is 100% volunteer. Oh, can you go to the next one? Thanks. We do apply for grants. The provincial government does give us a grant, typically every year, somewhere between $4,000 to $7,000 for training, because training is expensive and we do need to keep our skills up. We do solicit donations for the operating costs for our gear and for our equipment. Our own personal gear costs about $500 to $1,000 per person. When we deploy, we need to make sure that we can be self-sufficient for 72 hours out there. So that means that we're carrying food, a sleeping bag, tent, hiking boots, warm clothes. That all comes at a cost, but we pay that ourselves. Our annual operating costs to, pay for our facility and maintain our boat and the UTV, those operating costs are about $20,000 per annum. We are coming to a point where some of our equipment is getting older, that we do need to think about replacing some of it. Our boat has got quite a few hours on the motor. The rope rescue that you saw, we are coming up for recertification on that, so we need to replace some ropes and get some teams trained on that as well. So of course that comes at a cost. Some of our CSR partners that we partner up with are Adventure Smart. That is a program that we go out to the schools and we teach young kids about if you are lost in the woods, don't wander, just hug a tree is what they call it, and stay put. It's easier to be found if you can do that. We also work with the Canadian Search Dog Association. We've had some good success working with dogs. We were out in Brooks earlier this year in the summer. We had a 15-year-old girl that was missing, and the canine unit was very successful in locating her.
Excuse me, could I interrupt for just a sec? We have another agenda item coming quickly now at noon. If you could wrap in the next few minutes, I'd appreciate that.
And actually, that is right where we're at, so we can open it up for questions.
Thank you. That's your presentation? Okay, thank you. Any questions from council? Ellen, go ahead.
Wow, I'm amazed. So you guys pay that all yourselves? Your equipment, $1,000?
We fundraise or wrote grants for everything we have and everything we do, other than that bit of money we get from the Alberta government once a year that pays for one training course.
Well, I'm impressed, that's for sure.
Thank you. Holly, and then...
It appears your amount of donations varies greatly from year to year. Is there reasoning for that?
It kind of depends a lot on the climate of the environment too, right? We used to get a lot of money through oil and gas companies. Of course, that has dried up, right? We do also casinos. Again, COVID has kind of put a stop to that. So some years are really good for donations and some years are not. Just depends.
The other challenge that we really run into is people don't know about us. Unless we go out and we respond to an incident for you, people don't know we exist. Now, if you look at what's happening in British Columbia right now, there's a massive stuff happening in British Columbia. There are thousands of search and rescue volunteers out there rescuing people, helping with evacuation notices, all of that stuff. That sort of thing happens in Alberta as well. Even the plane crash that we were at, nobody really knew we were there. We go out there and we do this sort of thing all of the time, but unless we get called to somebody's incident, they don't really pay attention to that. So we try and get out there as much as we can, but we're sort of not glory getters. We go out there and do what needs to be done and put families back together. And there's nothing better than, I can tell you, putting a family back together. But we don't tend to garner a lot of notice. There are thousands of volunteers in Canada doing this, but you don't hear a lot about it. Not that we don't try.
Okay, thank you. Dan?
Hi. We were just at a regional emergency advisory committee meeting and going over all this kind of thing. This seems like a super valuable resource if we ever do find ourselves in that situation. And thank you for your volunteer hours. It's amazing that you spend that kind of money even on this yourself. I did have a few questions, but your presentation was done so well that they're all answered. I was going to ask how our support would be utilized, what's your greatest need for support, but that one's all laid out pretty well. Mostly just want to say thank you for volunteering. Your service is invaluable. So,
thank you.
Are there any other questions? If not, I'd also like to thank you for the good work you do on our behalf as volunteers. Very much appreciated. Thank you also for the education this morning. I think it's been, that certainly has been for me. We'll consider your request, and thank you for coming to make the presentation this morning. Any other last comments?
We really appreciate you guys hearing us and look forward to any support that you can give us. Would be absolutely amazing.
Thank you. Thanks, Tom. Okay, could we have a motion to break for lunch? Dan, thank you. Let's break for lunch. For information, we know we're going to the shop, to the service shop straight through, and the retirement party for Keith, or celebration for Keith Bartlett, who's been with the county for 43 years. I think you all got that notification, and we'll go over there and we'll see what the agenda holds.